Hey, what's up guys? We're going to take a quick look at what was perhaps the most controversial moment of yesterday's thrilling first Grand Prix of 2020. The incident that I think has got most people talking post-race is of course the moment that Alex Albon and Lewis Hamilton came together. After that final safety car late on in the race, Albon on the fresher, soft tyres, Lewis Hamilton on a set of well-used hard tyres, just trying to make his way to the end. Don't forget nursing various gearbox issues and sensor issues in the gearbox as well. It was Alex Albon that was on the charge, and it was the run-up to turn 4. Now, I don't have a Sky Pad or a fancy touchscreen like Karoon and Ant on Sky or Billy Munger on Channel 4, but I do have a whiteboard and some cardboard cut-out racing cars, so we should get the same effect. Now, let's take a look at it there. This is turn 4, fantastic drawing. You don't need me to explain that, you can tell that from the brilliant drawing. Lewis Hamilton is moved just off the racing line to defend his position because Alex Albon is approaching on these fresher tyres at greater speed. Lewis is in front at this point. He moves inside just to defend the inside line towards the corner. Albon pulls up alongside under braking, almost neck and neck as they go into the approach to the turn-in phase of the corner. Lewis Hamilton then starts his turn-in. Albon though goes with him, able to brake a little bit later, and they're pretty much neck and neck by the time they come towards the apex, which Lewis of course manages to clip with his car. Albon has to go wide around the outside of Lewis. But at this point, they are neck and neck. Now, from the apex onwards, the extra grip that Alex Albon has from his car allows him to get on the power much earlier than Lewis, despite not being on the racing line. And from this moment onwards, as Lewis makes his way around, it's Albon that just starts to get the power down and starts to pull ahead. Lewis is on the racing line, let's not forget. Albon though, each section we move forward starts to pull further and further ahead just because of that superior grip. By the time we get beyond the mid-corner towards the exit, Alex Albon is now well ahead of Lewis Hamilton, towards half a car length before the point that they make contact. Now Lewis is still pretty much following the racing line here. If there was no Alex Albon, Lewis would be probably following a very similar trajectory through this part of the corner. But Alex is there, and this is the edge of the racetrack. Alex cannot go beyond the edge of the racetrack, obviously. Now Lewis doesn't open up the steering. He doesn't deliberately push Alex wide and towards the edge of the racetrack, but Alex can't go any further. Lewis isn't really prepared to back off. He doesn't want to compromise his own exit onto this long straight, and so he starts just to move towards the edge of the racetrack as you would normally do. Alex though is well out here. Look how far ahead he is, because it's his rear wheel that makes contact with Lewis's front wheel, which shows you just how much further advanced Alex was. He was probably at full throttle at this point, or very close to it, just with his eyes heading down towards the next straight and Valtteri Bottas in the distance. Lewis runs out of space between himself and Alex Albon. They make contact, and Albon, as we now know, disappears off into the gravel. Now, the stewards, of course, had to have a good look at this. It was referred to the stewards from race control, as you would fully expect. Now, to look at why the penalty was applied, because we now know he got a 5-second penalty, we have to go into the regulations. Now, in the olden days, this kind of incident used to be covered in the sporting regulations under the driving section of the sporting regs. But in today's sporting regs, Article 27, still entitled driving, actually just uses the overall clause which says drivers must observe the provisions of the code, i.e. the FIA sporting code, relating to driving behaviour on circuits at all times. So let's go and look at the International Sporting Code from the FIA. Now, the International Sporting Code, hugely in-depth document that covers all kinds of racing, not just Formula 1. And if you go to Appendix L and then Chapter 4, Section 2, there is a headline which says overtaking, car control and track limits. So let's have a quick look through that and see what we think Lewis might have actually breached in this situation. So Section B says overtaking, according to the circumstances, may be carried out on either the right or the left. So that's absolutely fine for Alex Albon to go right or left of Lewis. That's no problem at all. A driver may not deliberately leave the track. We know that. More than one change of direction to defend a position is not permitted. Now Lewis didn't do that. He moved towards the inside line on the entry to the corner, but did not move back. That's absolutely okay. If you do move backwards, you have to leave a car's width, but Lewis didn't move back off the racing line, so that doesn't really apply there. However, manoeuvres liable to hinder other drivers, such as deliberate crowding of a car beyond the edge of the racetrack or any other abnormal change of direction, are strictly prohibited. Any driver who appears guilty of any of the above offences will be reported to the stewards. Now, this is covering an overtaking manoeuvre on a straight. It's not specifically talking about the corners. And then the other part that probably is the reason, and this is actually what the FIA stewards fell back on to punish Lewis, was that if we move all the way down to section D, causing a collision, repetition of serious mistakes, or the appearance of a lack of control over the car, such as leaving the track, will be reported to the stewards and may entail the imposition of penalties up to and including the exclusion of any driver concerned. So it's that, section D, causing a collision, that the stewards deemed was predominantly Lewis Hamilton's fault. And if we come back to this beautiful little demonstration over here, was it predominantly Lewis's fault? You can argue on one hand that overtaking around the outside of a corner like that, like Alex did, comes with some risk. Of course it does, but then so does any overtaking manoeuvre. Going around the outside, you are always reliant on the car on the inside to keep his car under control and to try and avoid the accident if you are in front. Alex was well in front. What could Lewis have done about it then? Well, in truth, not a huge amount. Although you could argue that he could have backed off and he could have put more steering angle in. I've heard people say he was on maximum steering lock. He wasn't on maximum steering lock. He may have been close to it, but he certainly wasn't maximum. And he could, of course, backed off and let the position go. No racing driver, though, wants to do that, and that's what I think happened here. Lewis was fighting, as you'd expect, right up until the moment that they collided. Alex thought he was through, thought he had clearance to put his foot down and go for it up the road, and the two collided. Was it a racing incident? Quite probably. But the fact is that Alex Albon, his car was ahead, well ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Lewis, although there's nothing specifically written in the sporting code or the FIA sporting regulations to actually cover this scenario, there's a bit of an unwritten rule that once a car is ahead, the guy on the inside, he has to concede that position. Lewis didn't do that, hence the 5-second penalty for the collision being predominantly his fault because he could have avoided it. Alex at this stage, by the way, could not have really avoided it. What could he do? He couldn't go any further out because he'd have been off onto above the curbs. He could have been off the racetrack. Lewis was the only one who had space to his right-hand side. He had the ability to back out of it, given that he'd already lost the position. He chose not to do it, and that, I believe, is where the 5-second penalty came in. We will talk about this a lot more, I've no doubt, in tonight's live show, but I'd love to know your thoughts on it. It's a polarising decision, this from the FIA. We can question the consistency of stewards' decisions because there have been plenty of incidents similar to this that maybe went unpunished, some that have perhaps had more serious punishments. So that's definitely an argument we can talk about later. There's also this idea that the stewards, well, they're humans, and humans will look at any given incident with a perhaps slightly different angle on a particularly different day, given the same information provided to them. That's the nature of humans making decisions. But they did have a driver. Tonio Liuzzi was the driver steward involved in making this decision. He's been in these situations before. He will have given his opinion, and the stewards will have taken that very, very seriously. I'd love to know what you think. Right decision, wrong decision? Will we be talking about this for weeks to come? Who knows?